Like, what would you tell a company, I guess, who is considering, adopting some Micro Four Thirds sensors into cinema cameras or third-party stuff? Because we've got things like the Sharp camera that never existed, that 8K camera, which had a Micro Four Thirds sensor, and a few other things. But like Blackmagic, should they keep making Micro Four Thirds sensors and cameras? Like, what's your impression on like other companies jumping into the Micro Four Thirds game?
I don't think Micro Four Thirds sensor is ever going to really die out. Just because it's in drones, they're probably going to put it in phones eventually because they have that 1 inch one in that one Sony whatever phone is, and which is a lie, by the way. If you're thinking about that phone, don't get it because it actually only uses a small portion of it. But there are the beauty of Micro Four Thirds is it's an open format, so any company can literally enter. It's not like those. It's not like Sony or Canon where you have to buy in to something. It's an open source sensor essentially. That's why a lot of these other companies makes random things like Yongnuo or whatever. I don't think it's ever really going to die out, but it really does seem like it's slowing in the higher in some professional markets outside of even like in sports photography, which I do a lot of. There's still the people that use DSLRs, so you could try to steer those customers away, but a lot of times they're just going to go into like an R3 or an A1, a bigger sensor camera. I don't see a lot. I don't see a lot of professional sports users. I see a lot in like maybe Pee-wee games, amateur. That's where I kind of sit around is like more amateur sports. I see a lot of that, but I don't see it ever going into like pro sports or anything like that. In filmmaking, though, that's different. I do see a lot of Micro Four Thirds cameras, especially with like reality shows and stuff and live streaming. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for photography and like more casual stuff, and I've been thinking this the whole time we've been talking, but I'd say that the popularity of smartphones has probably hit Micro Four Thirds harder than other formats. It's hit everyone hard, but the appeal of a small pocketable camera is a little harder of a sell when everyone has a small pocketable camera with them by default. And so when you're going to buy a professional camera, whether it's sports or filmmaking or whatever, it has to do a lot more than your phone to justify you taking it with you or purchasing it in the first place. And so I think that's why you see a lot of Micro Four Thirds cameras and lenses recently going in a lot different direction than they have historically. And that's why I think you do see people in professional senses of like filmmaking and things like that still going for Micro Four Thirds cameras in certain situations, and why you see people like birding and things like that. I mean, I don't think a phone's ever going to be viable for wildlife. So having even a average DSLR or a middle end Olympus with, a theoretical cheaper lens or an R6 with that 600 millimeter makes sense because it does something that your phone can't do and probably won't be able to do for a long time. Like maybe put like a tiny mirror lens in a phone. Like that's the only way I can think of doing
Yeah,
any kind of like pseudo wildlife, and it still is not going to be great. So
you're right though. I mean, like the niche is. You're right. The niche is going to prosper, but I don't know, man. Like, birding is one thing. Sports photography is another. Like how far could you sell birding? Like how could you really rely on just like a handful of things?
yeah, you can definitely like go too far into like a small market and That just means the cameras and lenses are going to be more expensive rather than less, although technology also could help curb that off a little bit. But I don't know. There's Micro Four Thirds is like really just for me, a good jack of all trades. They can push things like stabilization and processing power without worrying about like heat dissipation as much or other things like that. They can get right up to the bottom of like Super 35 and full frame, with a lot of higher quality record options or codecs or you know things like that. Like they are like scraping at the heels of those larger formats and those more professional, maybe some people might say, formats, but with great prices and availability. And I mean, things like ruggedness for Olympus, with being one of the only companies, if not the only company, that actually tests the weather sealing of their cameras like officially. Like, these are things that I think add up over time for Micro Four Thirds, because it's like, for me, I have a full frame camera and a Micro Four Thirds camera, and I still find myself I've never wanted to sell all my Micro Four Thirds stuff and go full frame, but I have wanted to sell all my full frame stuff and go back to just Micro Four Thirds. So there's something about the format that's really hard to put your finger on, but people are drawn to it in these different situations because it just offers so much for what it is without making too big of compromises. And I think that's what ends up drawing a lot of different crowds to it. Now,
That's
is that
kind of
enough
where I
long
stand.
term? I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there really is something about Micro Four Thirds that I find really hard to leave. Like even now, where I'm considering other cameras, I still keep going back to the OM1. I still keep going back to like an EM1 3 even, or EM1X. Like just even Panasonic G9, like, oh, or the GH6. There's those two cameras. The camera companies to me are just, I don't know. There really is something I can't describe that I just really enjoy. I used to be a Sony shooter too. And now I've never really wanted to carry that camera around. I carry my EM1 every day. There's not one day it's not next to me. I've never had that with any other camera.
It just, that you just know that they put everything they could into it and they pushed the format as far as they could push it. And they gave, you know what I mean? Like, they gave everything they could into every release, at least at the higher ends. And you can still feel that even with previous cameras. You know that the GH4 was the top of the line for almost all video features back in the day. The history behind Olympus and the image stabilization, or Panasonic and 4K video, and you can just feel that like history. There's some weird like thing going on there, and it's just like, I mean, you know what I mean? I sold my GH4, and
Yeah.
then I told like a million people to buy one, including my brother who did buy one, and then I bought another one myself. Am I just gonna, you know what I mean? Like, there's like, you can still, I think the GH4 is probably the best like camera to start on still, if you can't afford something more than like $400. Like, it's insane how good these cameras are so far down the line. And it's like,
Yeah.
you look at the like EOS RP or something, and it's like a joke compared to 3 generations of Panasonic camera ago, So anyway, we're going off on a bit of a tangent here, but hopefully people in the comments will like tell us their experience and like their attachment to the format, because there really is something intangible about it that I think a lot of people share, but a lot of people have trouble expressing. So
Yeah.
I definitely
Yeah.
encourage anybody to talk about this in the comments and like let us know what like your feelings towards Micro Four Thirds are. I know this is like super. We're pretty like technical, analytical guys most of the time, but um, there's an undeniable aspect to it that I think a lot of people experience for sure.
Man, we are romancing a camera, but
I know we better
yeah,
stop.
can't help it though, man. We just love these things.
It's true, but yeah. So I'm, whatever the future of Micro Four Thirds has in stall, and even if the future is limited compared to what it used to be at its heyday, that's the same with all camera companies, and I think we're just interested to see where these things go and what these technologies bring because, like we talked about before, Micro Four Thirds, whether it's Olympus or Panasonic, has really pushed the entirety of the camera world. And I think that's a video, that might be a topic for another day for us to discuss really everything that these systems brought to the table that people take for granted these days. So um, let us know if you want us to talk about that because we both know the history of these companies pretty well. And I think they could be a fun topic. But yeah, I'm really excited to see where these companies go and what new things they can bring to their own systems that Canon and Sony and Fuji go proceed to steal and do a little bit worse but almost as good.
All right.
Well,
I guess
should we leave it there?
I think we should, and then we have a lot of things that we could talk about in the next episode.
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess one last time, do you want to tell everybody about this project you've got coming up and some of these more episodes that might be appearing on your channel since and just let your audience know kind of what to expect and where to keep an eye out for that stuff on.
Yeah, man. So thanks, Rhett, for. I'm not very good at podcasting, so I'm literally just leaning on Rhett a lot. But the reason why I'm starting this podcast is because I'm using it to kind of follow me and what this next project is. But I'm shooting a feature. I'm DPing a feature for another buddy's script, and we don't really have a time frame yet because we're still in the early pre stages of things. But I wanted to use this podcast as a launching point to talk about it and try to gather some eyes on it. So, I mean, I know not every episode's going to be just to tell and be honest with everyone. Not every episode's going to talk about the film, but I'd still like some sort of way to speak to people and talk about other things that might be used as, no lie, as a filler. But yeah, that's it. I'm shooting a feature film, and I never really thought I'd be the kind of person that to DP a feature, but it's happening. And one thing that we all agreed on is it's going to be a Micro Four Thirds camera that's going to be shooting the feature. Whether it's going to be an Olympus, a Panasonic, or something else, it's going to be that a Micro Four Thirds sensor. So that's one of the reasons why the podcast is based on the MFT and why we're doing this, why we're talking about this right now, is just our love for MFT and what it could do, and to kind of prove to everyone out there that it still has a lot to offer.
Yeah, and that's really what comes back to me is like there's nothing that I'm lacking on Micro Four Thirds. If I got a feature film, if I was directing or shooting a feature film next week, which I might be, stay posted. Or if I was shooting any of my own projects, there's just nothing that Micro Four Thirds has to offer that there's nothing lacking in the system for me. So I'm like, why move to a different workflow, a different system when there's really nothing missing from these cameras? And so, yeah, I definitely hope I get invited back to the show to talk about this feature a little bit more because I've done a feature myself. By the next time you hear from me, I might have done a second one. But yeah, it's going to be fun to see this process, and I'm really interested to see. I guess the next episode is probably going to be a camera discussion on like what camera makes sense for this project. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about that, whether I'm involved or not. So
Yeah, man. Oh, and just for everyone watching on my channel, I really, if you're not subscribed to Rhett's channel, you have to. If you're even if you're not a Panasonic or Olympus Micro Four Thirds fan, just everything that he has on his channel is golden. All of his like films and his lens tests, he's low key really funny, and I don't know if he knows that.
I appreciate that, and yeah, I definitely want to. I think just like you, we started these channels based on Micro Four Thirds and their own systems and everything, but I think we both would love to lend our knowledge to people when it comes to the business side, the photography side, the videography, and even the cinematography side of things as well. So, whether that's on a podcast or dedicated videos, I think both of us would like to branch out just a little bit into some of those other more broad topics, even if at the heart of all those issues, a Micro Four Thirds camera is still filming us and we're still filming with it. And so I think for my channel and your channel, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming up that people should be keeping an eye out for. And I'm really excited to come back onto the show and chat with you some more. But anyway, I think it's time to call it here. And yeah, thanks everybody for stopping by, watching my half of the podcast, Paco Films official version of the podcast, and any future endeavors we might have. I always feel kind of crazy that anybody watches my videos. So it's we appreciate you guys, even if we don't always say it, because there'd be nothing for us to do if there wasn't everybody out there learning and continuing the conversation with us, right?
That's true. That's true. Really, thank you guys. Like, I know I haven't really done anything on my channel for a while, and I still get comments and emails just asking if I'm okay, and I really appreciate that. Like the one thing I didn't expect was the community that is revolved around having a channel. I never thought that anyone would actually care. And that's just a nice feeling to have.
Look at us getting sappy again. All right, you better cut this thing off before anybody sees the single tear rolling down our eyes. But anyway, thanks again, guys, and we will see you in the next one. And cut.